Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to another explainer, where we take some incredibly profound, complex source material and, well, map it out so we can actually see the structure of these ideas. Today is deeply fascinating. We're exploring a highly specific structural reading of ancient texts through something called the dual caustic universe framework. Think of it as a way to view these texts not as dusty history, but as an interactive map. This isn't about reading a timeline of the past. No, it's about decoding a massive structural mystery involving origins, illusions, and ultimately, systemic overrides. We're going to map out exactly how the initial point of human separation set off a chain reaction that is literally looping around us right now. Let's get started.
Consider this phrase for a second. Indeed, you are among the Mursalin, which roughly translates to the sent ones, or the messengers. Now, the sources we're unpacking today argue something wild. They argue that this ancient text is actually a live system, and it's addressing you. Right now, you. It's not a historical record about someone else's life. This framework suggests you are already pre-installed in this system. You're not just a passive reader sitting on the outside looking in. The text is actively reading you and defining your exact current state within this massive cosmic architecture.
And that brings us to the absolutely central premise of this entire framework. History is not linear. It's a closed topological loop. You, the viewer, the reader, you are an active spark moving through this cosmic circuit. You are inside a live execution system. The events described in these texts, the prophets, the mountains, the trees, they aren't just moral fables from a distant past. According to this structural reading, they're coordinates. They are precise points on a map, showing exactly how human perception interacts with a higher reality.
Let's look at how this builds. This is our compressed map for today's explainer. We start at the origin, the tree, which sets the whole machinery in motion. From there, we move into Era 1, where direct perception just completely collapses. That creates a massive void, which leads right into Era 2, the birth of what we're calling the Contraption, basically a systemic illusion. Then we hit Era 3, a localized state of absolute amnesia and forgetting. And finally, we arrive at the present, your present, the exact moment of potential activation. We're going to walk through this exact circuitry, step by step.
Section 1. The primordial separation. Ground zero of the circuit.
So we're jumping right to the beginning of the circuit, the absolute ground zero of the human experience. Let's see how this framework fundamentally reinterprets one of the most famous origin stories ever told. According to the source material, Adam approaching the tree, which is referenced in verses 235 and 36, wasn't just a simple tale of breaking a rule and getting punished. Not at all. The framework reads this as the primordial traversal. The tree was this gravitational test placed right at the center of abundance, and approaching it, that was the precise moment that duality, friction, and separation first entered the system. It wasn't a fall from grace like we usually think of it. It was a descent that actually loaded the cosmic covenant into the earth. It's the initial split that makes the entire rest of the loop possible.
Section 2. The collapse of perception. What happens when the direct sign completely fails?
Okay, so the split has happened. Now we move down the loop to see what occurs when humanity is confronted with a direct sign from the ultimate reality. Spoiler alert, our biological machinery completely fails to process it. Verse 7, 143 brilliantly illustrates this failure. It describes Musa, or Moses, asking to see his Lord directly. The manifestation appears to the mountain is instantly pulverized, and Musa literally falls unconscious. In this topology, this is the ultimate archetype of overwhelming disclosure. Direct perception just collapses. The human receiver simply cannot handle the raw manifestation of the source. Perception reaches its absolute limit, and it breaks.
But here's the thing. The collapse isn't always some explosive, mountain-crushing event. Sometimes it's entirely hidden. Take verse 34:14. This describes the archetype of Suleiman, or Solomon. He dies while leaning on his staff, but his death remains completely unperceived by everyone around him until a tiny creature of the earth, like a termite, eats the wood and the whole structure finally falls. The framework points out that this represents a hidden collapse. The structure is already dead. The reality is totally gone. Yet, the observers in the system? They just continue to assume it lives, acting and laboring under a complete, hollow illusion.
And this brings us to the crux of the third parallel, the crucifixion verse in 4:15. They did not kill him, but it was made to appear so to them. Now, in this topology, this isn't just a historical or theological dispute. It's the ultimate archetype of substituted appearance. Certainty is completely swapped out and replaced by conjecture. What simply appears to be true is completely mistaken for reality.
So the really crucial point here is how these three verses, the mountain, the staff, and the crucifixion, all map to a single, massive systemic pattern. Direct perception collapses. Period. Either it absolutely shatters you, it dies without you even noticing, or it gets swapped out with a convincing illusion. And what emerges in its place? Conjectural perception. The framework calls this conjecture Zan. Humanity is essentially left relying on assumption, outward appearance, and inherited structures, completely detached from the overwhelming reality of the true source.
Section 3. The birth of the contraption. How we fill the void.
So, what exactly fills the void when direct perception dies? When the mountain crumbles and the staff is hollowed out, we don't just sit there in the dark, right? We build something to fill the gap. The framework calls this the Taghut, or the contraption. It's defined as the structural void formed precisely in the space between a direct sign and an inherited assumption. When the apparent continuity of our inherited structures breaks, a closure point is established. The contraption is what we hastily construct in that empty space. It's this overarching systemic illusion of control, power, and continuity that we wrap ourselves in whenever we lose systemic awareness of the ultimate source.
How exactly do we fill this void? Well, we repeatedly build golden calves. The sources highlight Sumeri's golden calf as the ultimate visible substitute for guidance when the direct sign is absent. We use assumption to fill the absence of awareness, just like those observers staring at the hollow staff. And we use conjecture, or zan, to fill the absence of certainty, exactly as we saw in the crucifixion appearance. Humanity relies on these visible inherited illusions to patch over the missing truth, and what that does is create a dense, heavy layer of noise that traps us right in the loop.
Section 4. The reader's journey. And this is where it stops being about them and starts being about you.
Right here, the framework radically shifts. It stops mapping the universe out there and it starts mapping you, the individual reading the text. You have to go through 3 distinct stages in this topology. Step 1 is the Zayd phase, anchored in verse 241. This is your immediate response to the sign. That moment you are warned not to be the first disbeliever in the reality presented to you. Step 2 is the forgetting compression, which is a phase of total amnesia. And finally, step 3 is the Mursalin activation, the sudden, shocking awakening to your true function within the system. Let's zoom in on step 2 for a second. Verse 19:23 says, "Would that I had died before this and been forgotten completely." The framework describes this as the sheer agony of forgetting the origin. It is this painful, compressing descent straight into the illusion of time and the heavy gravity of the contraption. It's that visceral feeling of being entirely lost in the world, totally disconnected from the source, and experiencing the immense pressure of the topological loop from the inside. But here's the massive revelation hidden in the source material. Your identity isn't actually lost. That agony of forgetting, it's just a phase. You are the active, localized quantum node required to close the cosmic circuit. You are the Mursalin. You are pre-installed in this system all along. The memory of your origin is just dormant, waiting for you to execute the return sequence and completely shatter the contraption from the inside out. Section 5. The 1912 activation, the ultimate systemic override.
This is where the entire system converges. O Yahya, take the scripture with determination. That's from verse 19:12. Now, according to this framework, this is not just some historical command to an ancient prophet. This is the activation operator meant for you. Taking the book with strength is the literal command that turns on your recovery mechanism. It's the specific action that grips the invariant truth and shatters the illusion of the contraption. It locks the fields together and initiates your path right back to the origin.
Let's compare these 2 final states. Without 1912, the spark, meaning you, remains completely trapped in the contraption's illusion. You just wander endlessly in the assumed reality, building golden calves, relying on conjecture, trapped in this incredibly heavy loop of forgetting. But with 1912, you execute the systemic return. You sink right back up to the invariant source. You stop being a passive victim of time, and you become the active Mursalin, closing the cosmic circuit through your very own existence.
The system is live. The loop is mapped out. The contraption is completely visible now. And the activation sequence, it's right there in your hands. Which leaves us staring at the very center of this topological loop with one final, totally unavoidable question. When will you activate 1912?